Hi, this is Peggy from War. So today our guest is Timea Nagy, the CEO of Timea Schools, which is a social enterprise to end modern day slavery. So thank you so much, Timea, for being with us. You're doing God's work, so it's wonderful. So let me tell our viewers a bit more about Timea Schools. So you provide training to multiple sectors: financial services, technology companies, service provider. You have an amazing client books. You work with Capital One, Bank of America, American Express, RBC, CIBC, Verafin. Very, very impressive. And you are an international speaker and author. So thank you very much for being with us today. I know it's a busy time. You're fundraising. You're also looking for a new sponsor to accelerate your cause. We're really looking forward to hearing your perspective on financial services and your expertise on anti-money laundering. So thank you, Timea.
Such an honor to be here. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. So let's get started. So from your perspective, what are the major lasting impacts that COVID will have on the financial services industry?
I think it's going to change rapidly or drastically. I can speak from the perspective of the marginalized communities that I advocate for and that I work with. So there's a lot of individuals who are underbanked in Canada, in the US, in Europe, Australia, and around the world. There could be many reasons. One is because they are temporary workers, or because simply they just don't meet the criteria of opening a bank account, right? Mm-hmm. And because of such, so in Canada, we have probably at least 2.7 million people who don't have a bank account. And during COVID, they have much harder time accessing any kind of support, right? So if the government is giving out emergency support, how do you get that in the hand of somebody who doesn't have any kind of a bank account? Exactly. And then obviously now we're going towards a cashless society. Mm-hmm. So I think what that does to the marginalized is that it's kind of forcing them to find fraudulent ways, or it's forcing them to go and find alternative ways that are not necessarily up to the government regulators. Yeah. And for example, there is a company, I'm not going to name them, but I think they are thinking to put like one-time use Visa card and MasterCard machines out in stadiums and areas where there's a lot of people. So what you do is you take your cash, you put the cash in, and you get a credit card. Mm-hmm. And then you just start spending. There's absolutely no AML, no compliance. There's nothing behind it. So to me, that's money laundering. I don't even know how that's possible, but it's happening now. So I think what COVID is doing to the financial sector is it's really showing the real gaps that exist. It actually shows the number of people that could really use help and find an alternative way to bring them into the financial sector, even if it means that they are at risk. But we need to figure out how to do that, because if they're not going to come into our institutions, they're going to go somewhere else. And you're just going to create a whole other industry that is not regulated. And that's not where we want to go.
Exactly. Thank you very much. So staying on this regulation and policy perspective, so what do you think will happen in terms of new regulation, or at least new regulation you'd hope to see enacted following this pandemic?
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but I am really hoping that the new regulations are actually starting to brew somewhere. There's policymakers who are starting to talk about new regulations, mainly because a lot of financial transactions are going to go cashless and digital, right? And so, and not only that, because of COVID, now we have a huge need to send international transactions as well. We had that need before, which is where those money marts and all the other organizations came forward and kind of filled the gap. But again, it's incredibly hard to regulate them Imagine how hard it's going to be regulate new financial services that's popping out of nowhere. So I hope the regulators are recognize that this is a huge issue and that they need to come up with new regulations. What would that be? I'm not sure, because first we need to see where all this money is migrating and where the population is going to start using. What are they going to start using? Are they going to go away from traditional financial services and they're going to migrate more towards the alternative ones? I don't know. And if they don't and stay where we are, then we need to find a way within a traditional financial sector to accommodate the population who otherwise wouldn't be able to internationally bank and such.
Yeah. So, from your perspective and what we see, anti-money laundering is always something that is obviously front and center in your activities, which obviously makes sense. So that's something that's very interesting, because if I look from the other side of the fence, a lot of investors, fintech CEOs I'm speaking with might not have this ability like you have to think first AML and, oh, well, here there is a big gap we're not seeing, where actually fraudsters, human trafficker might engulf themselves and actually create a parallel way to monetize or to actually digitize their cash payment. So that's very helpful.
Yeah, and there's another side to it. So COVID created crisis, and one of the crises that was created is that we had a shortage of workers who will take care of our crops and the farming land. All the vegetables started growing, and somebody had to take care of it because the temporarily foreign workers couldn't come in. But we already had a lot of temporarily foreign workers in the country, but they usually are contracted by temporary agencies. So say Sobeys and large companies, meat packers, they hire the temp agency, and the temp agency is the one who's hiring the workers. So the problem that is that the temp agency is the one who gets paid, not the worker, because the worker is underbanked, because they're not allowed to open an account, or it's a lengthy process, or they don't have the proper identification, so on and so forth. So again, that's how you create human trafficking out of crisis, and that's how human traffickers are jumping on the opportunity, right? So crisis creates opportunities not just for business people, but for criminals as well. So and that's when the most marginalized end up being hurt, and that's why if we don't offer them a platform in a regular traditional system, they're going to find other ways because they have to.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. Your organization is global. You have a global perspective. You're an international speaker. From your perspective, what will have COVID in terms of impact on the global financial order, the global stability?
Well, it goes just back to the crisis and the crisis that it creates and the need that it creates. And there are certain businesses that's going to blossom and blow up and require more employees, and certain businesses will shut down, right? So as you see throughout Canada and the United States, small businesses, family-owned, heavily regulated businesses are shutting down one after another. Businesses where there was already a very low risk for human trafficking from my perspective, right? But large companies, large farms, large meat packers, food services, Amazon, and all of those large companies are now needing a lot more manpower. So people are migrating from heavily regulated areas into an area that's not fully regulated. It's almost kind of monopolized by large corporations and companies. And so I think it's not just happening in North America. I think it's happening around the world. And when you create a crisis like that, and when a lot of power ends up migrating into one large corporation and it's not superly heavily regulated, that's when I think the financial sector will see the same kind of problems showing up. So now you're really gonna have to start regulating large corporations and companies, textile firms, and all those companies that are actually blossoming out of this crisis. But we haven't done that. We haven't done a good job about that yet. So I don't know if just because of a crisis, we're going to be able to create a better regulation around the world for financial sectors to look after and make sure there is no further exploitation in those corporations. So I think it's going to affect the financial sector that way, that the money is going to migrate to one larger companies, and the supply chain really has to start to be investigated properly.
That's interesting, because from what I know in financial institutions, the anti-money laundering efforts really happen you as a person, and tracking where is the money coming from, is it weird amount of money coming, and that type of thing, or looking at corporation, but that doesn't really go deep enough to be able to actually pinpoint. To your point, if you're a staffing agency, they have no way of saying if 30%, 40% of the workforce is actually, slave working for nothing. So
right.
That's definitely a big miss. And I don't know if it's financial institutions who should do that work, to be totally honest, but there is a big gap here where it's easy to engulf yourself if you're a criminal.
And you know what, you're right. Like, I can't possibly answer you how is it going to impact the financial sector globally, but I can explain to you how the money is already started flowing. And it looks like that the wealth is migrating and going into larger corporations that are basically killing small businesses. And so when you go into larger corporations, they are already the problem when it comes to human trafficking. So the problem is not just doubling and tripling. And the question is, are the financial sectors are properly prepared?
Yeah.
Do our responsible investors, is there enough policies around the world in every country for you to say that if you're a responsible investor, you have the right to say, you know what, I'm investing in your company. As a result, I need to see your policies and I need to see the employment. How is the employees are getting paid? I need to see your payrolls. Is it possible? I don't know if we are there yet. I don't know if there are policies. There might be, and there might be some, policies that's already existing that I'm not aware of. So please don't take my word for it. But in Canada specifically, we don't have any policies about that. It's just your company. If your company is great, you're going to do the right thing, like McKinsey. They're doing the right thing, not because they have to, it's just because it's one of their company policy, right?
Well, and speaking about McKinsey Financial, actually, it's interesting you say that, because they partner as well with a scoring company called Impact Finance, which helps actually ensure that if you invest in socially responsible companies, they really are socially responsible, because, I can say tomorrow I'm green, and if no one check on what I'm doing, who cares, So it's actually extremely tight to look, to your point, at, you always want to follow the money at the end of the day. So if you're, and you know that better than I do, so if you're looking at impact investing, and if you're making sure that the investors can only or will only invest in these companies that, to your point, have processes, policies, procedures to ensure that there is no human trafficking, you're going to cut a lot of supply of cash. Because I assume these large organizations, they're not always aware that there is that type of malversation that's happening. So the top of the house thinks they're clean, and it's at the bottom of the house that there is a lot of shenanigan happening.
And there's another thing that we started talking about is there's one thing that's human trafficking, and there's another that's exploitation, right? You don't have to traffic your your worker, but you can still exploit them. There are firms, companies, large corporations who force you to work 12 hours a day, and you don't even get the minimum payment. And there's all kinds of tricks that they play out of their book. And right now they can, because they are the biggest corporations and they are the only ones who can actually employ you right now. So when it comes to crisis, it's like I said, it's not just the criminals who start benefiting or seeing the loopholes. It's unfortunately large corporations too. And I think that has to be investigated, and we have to start taking that very seriously. While it's not money laundering, and it's not it's not money laundering, but you're exploiting human beings. And that's just as bad, if you ask me.
Well, and it's always the fine line between what is illegal and what is unethical, and that's always a challenge. So so if I come back to the financial services industry and more precisely the competitive positioning, do you see from your perspective, which is very specialized, what type of financial organization will benefit from the crisis, or at least will be more willing to enact some policies, procedures, AML processes in order to make sure there is no financial benefit coming from human trafficking and exploitation?
Yeah, so I think the answer is there's two different answers to that. One is, I think there are companies who are set and able to kind of tweak their policies, and there are companies who are been so traditional that I think it's going to take them a very long time to be able to tweak their policies and able to help out and kind of get through this crisis properly. So I don't know if that fully answered your question, but
well, you know, I think it's very interesting from my perspective, working with both large financial institutions and smaller fintech, maybe, to see which ones, and I don't have the answer, and I'm sure you don't have the answer to that either, which ones will be the most reactive or hopefully proactive in thinking, well, some of our anti-money laundering policies need to actually be updated, the same way underwriting policies for lending need to be updated, because we don't live in the same world anymore.
Right.
So to your point, you know, employees who might have been working in small and medium business and now that are struggling to find employment and obviously money to pay for their home, their children, their food, might end up in a vulnerable position. So the question is, how fast both type of organization will be able to face that. I'm not even sure it's on the radar of anyone, to be totally honest. So
yeah.
With your interactions, do you see, I'm sure when you explain, people think, oh yeah, really, yeah, obviously, but without talking with you, I wouldn't have thought about it either, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I don't think it's on the radar. I really don't think it is. And I think it would be something, I think that would be actually a great conversation that you might be able to bring up in your next interviews when you invite individuals from the financial institutions. But I don't think it's on anybody's radar.
Yeah, well, and you know, I'll jump to the next point, which is linked with the digital transformation. Obviously, we've seen acceleration of the transformation with the fact that no one was able to go to the office or go to a branch, for example. From your perspective, do you see that acceleration as a good thing with what you're looking at, or is it something that is more an hindrance?
Well, you know what? If it's executed properly, it would be a great thing, to be honest. The wrong way to go about it is to make it completely digital, but still not bank the underbanked. Because I'll give you a couple of examples. When COVID hit, there was victims of human trafficking, Canadian girls, you know, across Ontario. One is 18 hours away from here, who as soon as this hit, she couldn't see her counselor. Victim services couldn't get to her. She had no money. She was put in a motel. She had no cell phone. She had no bank account. There's no grocery stores. There's nothing. What is she going to do?
Yeah.
Sitting in a motel by herself, withdrawing from drugs that was put into her while she was trafficked. She has no bank account. If she had bank account, they could have sent her money. You know, if she had a credit card, she could have signed up for Netflix. She was sitting in a dark room for 48 hours. She had no access to money. Even though victim services wanted to give her money, but they couldn't even give her cash. And even if they gave her cash, she couldn't go to the grocery store because they wouldn't expect the cash. But she can't even leave the motel because she's in quarantine. So, and I can tell you 500 stories like that happened during COVID, simply because they were not banked. And they were not banked because, you know, they may have had traffickers who ruined their credits, and the banks don't recognize that. They just like see the numbers and the papers. No, you have bad credit, we're not giving you anything. So I know that there is a lot of projects that have started, Project Recover, and there's a lot of great projects, and they're great, great projects. But again, it's not fast enough. So if every single bank would come on board and say, hey guys, let's do a pilot project and let's offer digital cards or digital banking solutions for these clients, and we will put them under a different AML. And I know it can be done. I mean, prepaid credit cards, companies do it. Banks already doing it. Give them a prepaid credit card. They don't take credit, you know, and you can still monitor the transactions. So let them build their credit. So I think that transforming into a digital transformation is fantastic if you allow the marginalized community to.
Yes, exactly.
Because when a temporary worker comes here, they are not relying on their temporary agency to get paid. They can go, say, Royal Bank or Bank of Montreal and say, hey, I'm a temporary worker. Can you give me a special digital account, right? Now they have a bank account, so to speak. They can get paid directly from the farm or from the hotel. And then the farm and the hotel just pays a percentage to the agency. So I think if we go digitally, that would be fantastic, and that would eliminate exploitation on so many levels. But only if you make it available for the underbanked and the marginalized and the temporarily foreign workers.
Thank you so much for explaining us that, because I do believe, you know, most of the viewers, me including, don't think that way. You know, we think 95% of Canadians, we think, you know, like average Canadian, and digital is amazing. We don't think about these human tragedies that actually are even more are made worse by some of the solutions that are put in place that are great for Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith, but don't for the marginalized population.
For example, the homeless population during COVID, they usually go and get their meal in churches and in those places where they hand out their meals, right? Well, during COVID, they couldn't go inside, right? You can't be inside more than, I don't know, 2 people. So these organizations had them line up outside in parks and outside of churches. Can you imagine how you feel as a homeless, that you need to stand in line up for the entire town to see that you, not only that, you're going to go there, you stand in line up for 2 hours to get a meal, one meal, and then you go about your day, and then tomorrow you can come back and stand again in line to get one more meal. What does that do to your dignity, first of all? So if we have digital payment solutions, right, and they could actually be banked as well, the government could have given them directly money, right? They could have just received some money, because when you're homeless, most of the time you make your money from the street, and when you're outside of coffee shops, then you're asking for donations, right? During COVID, everyone was in lockdown. They had nowhere to go. There's no washrooms to use. There's no food. The food banks were closed. So they had to line up every day, once a day, to eat a meal. If the emergency plan was available for homeless people, and homeless people would have been able to get digital cards with the money on it, they didn't have to wait 12 hours to go in a lineup in the park for everyone to see it, that they have to eat this way. They would have had money on their card. They would have gone to Tim Hortons and whatnot and had their sandwiches and eat it too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Timea. First, you know, for educating us. I think that was extremely enlightening. You know, I believe I know the financial organizations and the financial system very well, but you brought such a different light that will put me and many people to shame, I think, for not realizing that. And, you know, I really want to make a call to the viewers. Actually, Timea is fundraising and also looking for sponsoring for growing and accelerating our company. You heard her thoughts. So her name, obviously, the LinkedIn will be in the post. So don't hesitate to reach out to her. If you're in a financial institution, as I'm sure you realize, you really need to speak with her and take some training. So thank you again, Timea. It was really, really lovely to have you. Do you have one parting word maybe you want to say that we didn't touch and you want to share with the audience?
I just want to thank you, and you know, I want to thank you and the financial sector, because it's not that you don't want to help; it's just you don't know. But most of our support now is coming from the financial sector, and the frontline people in the financial sector are so incredibly passionate and have done so much for this movement. So I just want to thank you so much. And yes, we are going to start our trainings and courses and classes on AML, responsible investors. And obviously the money is going back right to the cause. We are a social enterprise. But again, I appreciate your perspective, but don't feel too guilty. Really, you guys are doing the best you can. And if there's anybody out there who feels like you need more education, ACAMS is doing wonderful job on education. There's the United Nations and the Liechtenstein Initiative, who's doing an amazing education on human trafficking. It's called the Blueprint. They call the FAST Initiative. And obviously we are going to offer, there's the PRI, obviously, who's doing an amazing job to do education for the responsible investor sector. So you guys doing an amazing job. It's just, you know, I'm an advocate, so I'm a little impatient. I wish it could go a little faster, but we can't complain. We can't complain. So I just want to thank you for your involvement with us as well. And I want to thank your viewers for just even listening to this and wanting to get more education.
Thank you so much again, Timea, and I'm really looking forward to maybe a follow-up in a few months to see all the progress we've made with all the money we're raising and all the interest we gathered. So thank you so much again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.